After retiring from 25 years in the army, all I wanted was peace. Not the kind of peace that comes with beaches and resorts or even a quiet little suburb. I wanted open skies, the smell of horses, space to breathe, something raw and real. So I bought a ranch. It wasn't a massive spread, but it was mine. 10 acres of mostly flat land with a small barn, a modest house with a wraparound porch, and a gravel driveway that curled like a lazy river up from the 2-lane road. It sat just outside of a growing town in the southwest. Enough development nearby that I could get supplies when needed, but far enough out that I could see stars again. That mattered to me. The real estate agent had told me the place wasn't under HOA control. I checked again before signing anything. She showed me a copy of the plat map and everything. No HOA boundaries, no shared roads, nothing. "You're free out here," she said, with a smile that hinted she knew exactly why I asked. The first week felt like heaven. The moving truck came and went, and I spent the next few days settling in. I set up my tools in the barn, took walks with my dog Bullet down the gravel path, and woke up every morning without an alarm. The silence was powerful. No sirens, no neighbors slamming car doors at 2 a.m., just wind in the grass and the occasional rustle of a deer near the fence line. Then came the knock. Well, not a knock, exactly. More like a tap on the porch post, with a long fingernail, sharp and deliberate. I looked up from where I was unloading some boxes near the front steps. Standing there was a woman in a perfectly ironed beige blouse, pearl earrings, and oversized sunglasses that covered half her face. She held a clipboard like it was a weapon. "I'm Karen. I'm the president of the Spring Meadow HOA," she said, pointing vaguely over her shoulder. Spring Meadow was a small housing development a good quarter-mile from my property. Close, but not connected. I nodded politely. "Afternoon. I noticed someone moving in here, but we hadn't received the proper move-in documentation." I looked at her like she'd just spoken Latin. "Move-in documentation? Yes," she said firmly. "Your truck, your boxes, you're obviously moving in, but there's a process. A review board, landscape expectations, noise compliance." I chuckled, not to mock her, but because the idea was so out of place. "Ma'am, this land isn't under HOA rules." I checked. Twice. She tilted her head and tightened her lips, like someone had just told her the wine was out of stock. "Everything around here falls under our community management. Just because your address isn't technically within the development doesn't mean you can operate without standards. Property values are at stake." I resisted the urge to ask her which values she meant, mine, or hers. Instead, I said calmly, "I'm not in your HOA. I bought this ranch specifically because it's independent. You don't have jurisdiction here." That clearly did not sit well with her. She scribbled something furiously on her clipboard. "We'll see about that." Without another word, she turned on her heel and walked away, clicking across my gravel like she expected a red carpet. My dog Bullet gave a low growl and watched her all the way to her car, a shiny black SUV with a vanity plate that said, "KARENPWR." I kid you not. I shook my head, trying to laugh it off. I'd faced down military officers, insurgents, and bureaucrats with entire binders full of nonsense. One overzealous HOA president didn't scare me. But still, I had a feeling this wouldn't be the end of it. The next morning, I found a typed letter shoved halfway under my front door. It was unsigned but printed on a generic HOA letterhead. "Failure to comply with move-in procedures," it read. "You are expected to attend an emergency orientation meeting this Friday." It was laughable. No name, no contact number, no signature. Just a demand. I didn't respond. I didn't even keep the letter. I tossed it into the fire pit along with the cardboard I was burning that evening. If this was how Karen operated, I wasn't playing her game. But she didn't back off. Over the next couple of days, I caught glimpses of her car slowing down as it passed my property. Once, I noticed her parked across the street, talking to a couple I assumed were other HOA members. They pointed toward my driveway and nodded like they were planning a military strike. I didn't care. At least, I told myself I didn't. But the idea of someone thinking they could control my land, after all I'd seen and done, started to gnaw at me. This ranch was supposed to be my sanctuary. My reward. The last thing I wanted was neighborhood politics. By the 5th day, I figured it would fizzle out. Most people with too much time on their hands just needed to blow off steam, then find a new target. But not Karen. That afternoon, I was in the back pasture with Bullet, walking the fence line. I'd noticed a section where a few of the posts were leaning, probably due to age or shifting soil. I was planning to reinforce them before running cattle later in the summer. While I was kneeling down with a level and some rebar, I heard the faint crunch of tires on gravel. When I came around to the front of the house about 10 minutes later, I found a small orange notice taped to my mailbox. Unapproved structural activity, it read in all caps. You are in violation of HOA Regulation 14B. There was no HOA Regulation 14B. At least not for me. But that didn't stop her. She was watching from her SUV again, parked diagonally across the road like a traffic cop. When she saw me read the notice, she rolled her window down just far enough to speak. You can't modify property lines without pre-approval, she said, her tone smug. Even if you're not technically under the HOA, you're setting a bad precedent. I took the notice off, crumpled it, and shoved it in my pocket. Ma'am, I said firmly, I am not part of your HOA. You can't enforce your rules on my land. You're disrupting the uniformity of the community, she snapped. I'll be reporting this. To who? I asked. Your board. The county already approved my purchase. And I don't answer to your bylaws. She huffed and drove off without another word, her tires kicking up dust. That night, I sat on the porch with Bullet lying at my feet, sipping iced tea and staring at the stars. It was quiet again, the way I liked it. But something told me the silence wouldn't last long. Karen wasn't just a busybody. She was on a mission. A personal crusade to bring me in line. The way she saw it, I was a threat to the imaginary order she believed she controlled. And if she couldn't beat me with notes and fake rules, I had a sinking feeling she'd escalate. What I didn't know then was just how far she'd go, or how badly it would backfire on her. Absolutely. Here's the expanded version of Chapter 2 in approximately 1,300 words, written as a smooth narrative without a heading, continuing the same tone and style. 2 days passed without incident, and I thought maybe, just maybe, Karen had decided to move on. Maybe she finally read a map. Maybe someone on her little HOA board reminded her that people outside the neighborhood were none of their business. Maybe she got distracted by someone painting their shutters the wrong shade of taupe. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday morning. The air was already heating up, and I was outside stacking the last few crates of gear from my old workshop. Power tools, fishing rods, a couple of things I still hadn't unboxed. Since my deployment overseas, Bullet lay in the shade of the porch, watching birds like he owned the sky. Everything felt normal, calm. Then I heard the engines. Not one, but 2 police cruisers came rolling up my driveway. Slow, deliberate, lights weren't on, but the message was loud and clear. Someone called in backup. I wiped my hands on my jeans, gave Bullet a quiet, stay, and walked down the path to meet them. Karen wasn't far behind. She stood near the mailbox, arms folded like she was posing for the cover of a neighborhood newsletter. The same smug look on her face. Proud. Too proud. One of the officers stepped out first. Young guy, early 30s maybe, clean-shaven and a little nervous. His partner stayed near the cruiser, talking into the radio. Morning, sir, the young officer said, offering a cautious nod. We received a report about a possible trespassing issue on this property. I blinked. Trespassing. I own this property. Yes, sir. The caller stated that someone had moved into the area illegally, without the appropriate approvals or permits. They claimed this area falls under HOA zoning. I didn't have to look over to know Karen was listening to every word. I sighed and pulled my phone out. I've got the deed right here, I said. Title, Survey, County Clearance. This land is privately owned and not part of any HOA. The real estate paperwork makes that clear. The officer took the phone and looked through the documents I pulled up. His eyes scanned quickly, and I could tell he wasn't seeing any red flags. All right, he said carefully. That helps. But since we've been called out, we'll need to take a quick walk around, confirm no ordinance violations. Just standard procedure. I shrugged. Go ahead. You won't find anything. He nodded and motioned to his partner, who stepped out and followed him up the path toward the barn. As they started their check, I turned to Karen. She was already halfway across the street, arms still crossed, lips pursed like she'd bitten into a lemon. Her whole posture screamed satisfaction. This doesn't have to be hostile, she said. If you'd just follow the proper channels. I'm not under your HOA, Karen, I cut in, calm but firm. You can't keep calling the cops every time I move a box. She smirked. I'm protecting the community. You don't understand how fragile property values are. One unregulated resident and it all goes downhill. You mean someone you can't control, I muttered. That must have touched a nerve because she glared like I'd just insulted her grandkids. This isn't over, she snapped. It wasn't, because right as the officers circled back from their inspection, another car came down the driveway. A black SUV with tinted windows. Not police, something else. I knew the license plate. I'd seen it enough times in front of my house on holidays, at birthdays, at every family event that mattered. Jake, my son. He stepped out wearing his full uniform, deputy sheriff's badge gleaming, utility belt in place, and the confident stride of someone who's dealt with worse than petty neighbor complaints. Karen didn't know who he was yet, but she would soon enough. Hey, Dad, he said, nodding in greeting. Heard you had company. I grinned. You could say that. He turned toward the officers and flashed his badge. I'm Jake Reynolds, Sheriff's Office. These are my father's documents, he said, gesturing to the phone still in the officer's hand. This is legally owned property, free of any HOA jurisdiction. I pulled the county records myself when he bought it. Karen's face began to twitch. Excuse me, who are you? Jake turned to her slowly. Deputy Reynolds, ma'am, and you must be the one who made a false report. What? She stammered. That's not a false report. He moved in without permission. Jake raised an eyebrow. Permission? From who? From the HOA, she snapped. There are regulations, processes, none of which apply here, Jake said, voice cool and controlled. This property falls outside your HOA's mapped authority. You've made 2 calls now, both alleging criminal trespassing, both knowingly false. You've issued citations on property you don't govern. And you've tampered with a private mailbox. All of which can be considered harassment or worse. Karen's eyes widened. This is ridiculous. I was only trying to enforce the rules. Ma'am, Jake said, stepping forward, you're not a law enforcement officer. You don't get to invent violations. And I'm placing you under arrest for making a false police report and criminal harassment. Karen froze. Her mouth opened, then closed. You're arresting me. Jake was already pulling out a pair of cuffs. Yes, ma'am, turn around. Hands behind your back. She took a step back, looking to the young officer as if begging for help. Are you really going to let him do this? The officer glanced between her and Jake. Deputy Reynolds has jurisdiction, ma'am. I have rights, she shrieked. Yes, Jake said as he gently pulled her arms behind her back, and you also have responsibilities. One of them is not wasting police time over imaginary rules. As he read her Miranda rights, Karen looked like her whole world had collapsed. Her voice cracked, her glasses slid down her nose, and for the first time since I met her, she looked small. Powerless. The young officer handed me back my phone. Sorry for the trouble, Mr. Reynolds. Looks like you were telling the truth all along. I nodded. It's all right. I know you guys were just doing your job. They led Karen toward one of the cruisers. She didn't fight, just kept muttering something about setting a terrible example, and neighborhood standards. But no one listened this time. Jake stayed behind for a few minutes after they left. We stood in the shade with Bullet lying between us, tail flicking lazily in the dirt. You didn't have to come out, I said. But I'm glad you did. Jake shrugged. She filed a report using legal codes that don't even apply. I couldn't let that stand, especially when it's family. I looked at my son. Tall, grounded, steady. He wasn't the boy I raised anymore. He was a man now, and a damn good one. I thought this was supposed to be the quiet life, I said with a chuckle. Jake grinned. Yeah, well, you picked the wrong neighborhood for that. We laughed together, the sound echoing off the barn. It felt good. When he finally drove off, I walked back to the porch and sat down next to Bullet, who gave a little satisfied huff, as if he'd been waiting for the drama to end. I sipped my tea and looked out over the land. My land. The sun was starting to dip low in the sky, casting golden light over the fence line. And for the first time since I moved in, I didn't feel like I had to watch my back. Karen was gone. The ranch was mine again. The peace I'd fought for, earned, had returned. I knew there might be other battles, other loud neighbors or misguided forms of control. But now they knew. This land wasn't up for negotiation. And I wasn't alone.